As a former history teacher, school principal, and superintendent, he has dedicated more than 35 years of his life working in public education. A native of Coffeyville, Kansas, and a KSU graduate, he currently holds his doctorate of education in secondary administration, school law, curriculum development, and instructional leadership. He was named an alumni fellow at Kansas State, and in 2015 was honored by being named the Kansas Superintendent of the Year. Please welcome our Commissioner of Education, Dr. Randy Watson.
Thank you for being here. You know, when I took this job, one of the first things that I did just said we have to attack the teacher shortage. And Ken Weaver co-chaired that Blue Ribbon Task Force that Dr. Berry talked about. And one of the things in that Blue Ribbon Task, one of the recommendations was to have this conference, was to have an ongoing discussion about what we need to do in Kansas relative to teacher quality, teacher shortage. And so that work continues, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that from a Kansas perspective. But I was telling Dean Mercer, Dr. Berry, I just need to drop the mic and walk off because it's ditto, right? Thank you so much for being here and being in Kansas. And just the great things that you said and the things that we're trying to do. So what I think is unique about our state, and for those of you that maybe grew up in Kansas your whole life like I did, you don't always appreciate, I think, the things that we have in our state because you think, well, we're a flyover state. You know, we're the state. People say, yeah, I flew over that one time, or I drove through Kansas trying to get to the mountains, but it took me forever, right? We hear that. And all that's true. But what I really think, and I think Dr. Berry would agree with this, I think and I'm really optimistic about whatever challenges we have, and we all have challenges, is one of the things I think Kansas, we can do this, is because we all know each other. And it's an opportunity to roll up our sleeves and just say, okay, since we know each other, and you know, the week of Thanksgiving, I'll be reminded of that in a few days when my family gets together and argues about all the things, you know. But that argument's good because like my family, we don't ever doubt that we love each other. It's just we may have a different of opinion, and that's okay, right? As we try to figure this out and go forward. So I'm going to talk, you know, a great deal about this week as family, and also on Saturdays the state football championships, and I'm going to refer back to that too, because I think there's some things that we can learn about education. And I was having several conversations out in the hallway with several of you. We know enough about what we need to do to change. We know enough. The model's already there. It's staring us in the face, and we just have to tweak it a little, and it's the hardest work we'll ever do. It's there. All the indicators are there. So here's the board's vision, derived exactly what you said you wanted in Kansas. That's what makes it so unique. Give the state board a ton of credit, and we'll have 3 new state board members that we'll see if they want to massage this in any way or where they want to take it. But they've all 3 that will be coming on have indicated in their process for running for office that they support it. But obviously you can say you support this because, you know, who wouldn't, right? Until you get into the weeds and the details, and then everyone says, well, but maybe not that. And that's okay. That's okay. But I think it certainly is instructive about, you know, what it is to lead the world. And I often joke, as you've heard me speak, about, you know, it's much better to have a vision statement that doesn't say beat Oklahoma or Missouri. And we just spent some time in Coffeyville, my hometown, right on the border, in the last week, and state board spent 2 days there. And when you have a captive audience in your hometown for a couple of days, I took them for the sightseeing tour, and we drove into Oklahoma, a few of us and they said, "Where are we at?" I said, "You're in Oklahoma. Welcome to Southtown." But I say this, when I left Coffeyville to come to Kansas State to start my undergraduate work, I left a class of 265 kids in what at that time was a 4A high school, and we only had 5 classifications, and a town that was just on the short side of 19,000. Today, they'll probably graduate 110 kids in a town of 9,000, and it looks remarkably different. So that community's trying to figure it out, and I was so impressed by that school system, of many of the things, Dr. Berry, you talked about what they're trying to do to not only change the trajectory of each kid and each family, but by doing that, they're changing the trajectory of their community. So it's so really cool. So this morning I got up and I thought, all right, how am I going to frame this as we talk about this? And I think about this issue a lot. I thought about it this weekend. As people ask, and it's honestly true, they know this. I did not know, Whitney, who was going to win Saturday. I don't care, because you're all winners. And that's the way we think about it. That's the K-Toy team. They're going to be together all year. And the only thing sad is that the 18 team now thinks they'll never get together again, but they will. And so I got up this morning, I thought, there's something I thought about, and again, Dr. Berry just teed it up for me, and that, do you remember this? Do you remember the craze of Cabbage Patch right? Some of you are like, what's he talking about? You're too young, I understand. The Cabbage Patch craze. And I pulled this one off from, this is the original Cabbage Patch, sold, this is where I pulled this off, at Montgomery Ward. Sears and Roebuck is where you really stood in line. That's instructive, right? And do you remember the craze? And your kids, if you were like my daughter, really, really young, Mom, Dad, I gotta have a Cabbage Patch. There's no way to get one. Right, you could stand in line, they were gonna sell out. You couldn't go online to order. It was a disaster. And I thought, what creates demand? What creates the market that every kid wanted to have one of these stinking dolls, right? Nothing special about the doll at all, but we created market and we created demand. So I wanna kind of give the Kansas version of Dr. Berry's presentation today and talk about what I see as I travel to each school district in Kansas and what I hear from Kansans about how do we create demand, how do we sustain it, and how do we market it. And here's what I will tell you. There's not a day, and I'm not making this up, Michelle knows in her new job, there's not a day that goes by when I'm in a school district that someone stops me in that school district and says something to these lines. Hey, Randy, I got this person that cannot get licensed in the state of Kansas. It happened Saturday night. All right, I'm getting ready to eat. Here came someone. I would like to introduce to you my wife who cannot get licensed in the state of Kansas. Lovely. Okay, so I already told Michelle and Susan, this is how great, Susan, Michelle, you're welcome. I'm going to forward this on to you. But here's what I want to tell you, all right? And you know this. Debbie, you're going to like for me to say this, but it's true. This is not a licensure problem. We have more ways to get you licensed, all right? Dale said this Saturday night, that Van Camp has beans. Okay, I was going to say that Carter has pills, but it's the same thing, right? We can find a way to get you. This is not a licensure issue, but we think it is. All right, because of the N of one somewhere, and there's N's of one. All right, I'm not opposed to, again, innovative ways. Shirley and I were talking about the to teaching and what Wichita State is doing with that, and the numbers of people that we're transitioning, that were these great people that were our paraprofessionals, and how to keep them. We need to be innovative and think more like that. That helps, but that's not the problem. That's not the problem. So Dr. Berry shared with you research, and then I come back to the place where I have 3 degrees to just share with you whatever's on my head. With a little bit of research, but mostly just my insight of what I observe, all right, and how I think we're going to go about it. So I'm going to start with you guys, all right? You didn't know this. I'm going to start with you guys. This is a map of Kansas, and these are congressional districts. And, you know, and it may change in the 2020 census, right, as we get closer to that time. So these are the 4 congressional districts, which then translate for us that run the Kansas Teacher of the Year program into the 4 areas of which we scale up our Teacher of the Year program, okay? And so so we call that one on your left, the big, you know, Sally Cobble's the big Western Kansas, which is far more than Western Kansas. As you can see, it reaches all the way to here, right? All the way to Manhattan. And then the South Central, the Southeast and Northeast, and then the Johnson, Wyandotte, Leavenworth County area. All right, those 4. And we had a great celebration, Jennifer, right, in Salina, right? A great celebration in Salina of teachers, full house. In fact, I understand we may be moving it next year because I grew up. We'll talk about that. Then we went to, so that weekend, because for my entire life in education, I only got to go to Salina, right? Cherry, you'll know this, right? Because that was the region I was in McPherson. So, so what you don't understand is when you go to all 4 of those, every time, they're different cultures. And I'm going to show you that. They are different. The way they approach it are extremely different, which is kind of cool. So we start in Salina. We then go to Wichita. We drive back to Topeka. The next morning and afternoon, we're in Topeka, and then we end up in Johnson County. And it's wonderful. And so we had this illustrious celebration of the very best teachers representing even greater numbers of great teachers, as Dr. Berry said, right? And here's how many school districts participated. So I said to Debbie, Dr. Barrett, I'm just going to drop the mic and say ditto and walk off, and I ought to do that right now. Here's what I'm going to tell you over and over and over and over again in the short time that we're together this morning. This problem cannot be changed until we change ourselves. This problem cannot be changed until we change ourselves. There's not a thing Jim Porter and Kathy Bush, as the chair and the vice chair of the state board, can do to eliminate the teacher shortage problem when only 17% of the teachers and the schools in this state will even put somebody up for Teacher of the Year. We should have that at the old Bicentennial Center, whatever, Tony's Pizza Event Center, and it should be filled. All right, it should be filled because it's a celebration of not these people. They just represent the people, and yet we can't do it. And so, Ken, you've heard me say this. When I had the opportunity, and I've shared this with Rick and everyone, when I had the opportunity when you got a new president in Emporia State, and I was invited over, and Blake Flanders and I went on, I think it was a Thursday night, but they had been celebrating for a week. I just got there on Thursday. They had been celebrating, and I was there for several hours on Thursday evening, and they were there to celebrate the new president, and they had people on stage for about 4 hours giving them awards, and they talked about how grateful they were to get an award and how proud they were. Higher ed knows how to recognize themselves, and we are horrible at it because we are too modest about the work that we do. And you can't expect other people to be excited about that work when we're not excited about the work. 17%. So, Whitney, I'll just let you know, I was excited about whoever would have had the opportunity to go on to DC and represent all of us. But there was a little bit that was even more exciting when KCK won that. Right? High poverty, urban district. And you know what? I'm waiting for the time when a 1A school district wins that, because I'm looking for that time. When one teacher with a staff of 15 wins the Kansas Teacher of the Year, because that will start to change the discussion in our state. So I hear well, Randy, we would put someone up for Teacher of the Year, but the teachers don't want to do it. I know they don't, because they don't want the accolades on them. It's not about us. It's about our profession and everyone. So surely it's better in Wichita. By the way, the 17% that's represented out west, the urban areas. Manhattan, Dodge City, Garden, right? The major markets. You go to Wichita, it's the major markets. It's Wichita, Goddard, Mays, Andover. You go to Southeast, Northeast, it's Topeka, Shawnee Heights, right? You get down Southeast Kansas, I think we had 2 school districts in Southeast Kansas. Other than that, it was nothing. And then go to Johnson, Wyandotte, and Leavenworth. Every school district but Kansas City Piper, I'll call them out, because it's easy. It's every school district. And you know what? By the time you get there, which is the last for us, it's highly competitive, right, wouldn't it? You just feel it. I mean, I say competitive. They want their teacher to win so bad because it says something about them. By the way, that's the only place, this is just correlational, that's the only place we don't have a teacher shortage. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. Lots of reasons for that. We ought to have 90%. And by the way, here's the other thing that infuriates me about the teacher there, and it did so as we had the opportunity to honor that. We had just short of 500 people down in Wichita. Is, how many, just throw out the number, how many of your colleagues that you teach with were there Saturday night?
My colleagues?
Yeah, your colleagues that you teach with. 2, 3, 15. Great. 0, 1. We should have had the entire school. And the superintendent should have got a bus. And the principal should have demanded it. And we should have let you off on Monday. No, all of those are within our control. This is not something that needs external control. So that we could have made this a huge event. Again, when you go to Western Kansas and Dodge and Garden, it's a 2-day event for them to drive in and do that. And they do that. This is about, we have to change the narrative of recognition. Does that make sense? So it was a great event, right? I mean, it's a great event. But, even have the discussion with my own family. We've got to change this. I'm talking about, so I want 17 to become 30, to become 40, become 50. And I want to be at the Bicentennial or the Tony Event Center. And I want to be at Coke Arena. Or, I want to be at, I don't know where. I don't know where we can go. I want to be at the Expo Center. And I want to be at the Convention Center. And then I want to have 5,000 people with laser light shows and red carpet. I do. I said that to Dale as we walked off the stage. That's not a dream. That's what I want to see. Because when we get to that level, we will start to market our profession differently. Does that make sense? Now let me go on. So that's easy. By the way, in McPherson, I just went to some banks and said, would you sponsor the Teacher of the Year? All right? And I'll tell you 2 stories about it. And the banks were like, yeah, we'll do that. And there was one year, I gave a check for over $2,000 that just came from the banks. It was a program that they ran, and it depended on how many. All right, and then we paid for the cake, and we paid for the punch, and we paid for everything, and the banks did it all, and we honored them. And I couldn't get our own teachers in McPherson, right, Angie, to come. We used to do a dinner, nobody came. We went to reception, nobody came. We tried to nominate people, I don't want to be nominated. We can't solve this until we want to solve it ourselves. This is not, Brad has a great slide that I should have shown today, which is, we're one of the only professions that waits for government to tell us what to do. And as I travel, people are coming up wanting how I'm going to solve, and the state board's going to solve this problem. Same thing with the deans here. How are you going to solve this problem? It's not theirs to solve. It's not ours to solve. It's collectively ours to solve. It's collectively ours. So here's another map, because we have lots of maps in Kansas, because, we just make up, different territories. You can be in whatever county. This is now the economic development map of Kansas, and basically the only difference in this map versus the first map is that we took southeast and northeast Kansas and split it in half. Does that make sense? So instead of 4, we have 5. These are the economic regions of Kansas as determined by the Department of Commerce. Okay? And I took this snapshot that I'm going to share with you in late September. So the data I'm going to share with you could easily have changed slightly since November. But what do you hear? What do you hear? In Great Bend, Signe, what do you hear about? And we're going to call Great Bend just for today, Western Kansas, because we know it's not. Okay, but if you're in this region, what do you hear from parents and kids all the time? I wish our kids would stay and come back home. Right? If you're in Dighton, Kansas, the fear is my kids graduate high school and they never come back to Dighton, right? Or even Great Bend. Right? Or even McPherson. They go off to Johnson County or Chicago or Austin, and they never come back. So all I did was go to the Department of Commerce in late September, and I wanted to know if I were to get a job in that region or any of these regions, what jobs were open. And so here's what I looked for. I looked for a $17 an hour job or better, and I looked for the most plentiful, largest number of the $17 an hour jobs or better, okay? And this is in no particular order, so this isn't in rank order. Healthcare. So people ask me, what kind of healthcare? Yes. Right? You want to be a dentist? Jobs. You want to be a nurse's aide? Job. You want to be, a physical therapist? Yes. The answer is yes. Teaching. Again, no particular order. These are just the top 5 in no particular order at the end of September, pay over $17. Ag-related jobs. Business, all kinds of sales, support, managerial, but business jobs. And machining. That's the Western Kansas. Okay? Want a job today, pays better than $17 an hour, and you can still stay in Meade, Kansas. There's the top 5 occupations that have the greatest number of jobs that pay over $17 an hour in Western Kansas. There is South Central. Do you see a pattern? Teaching, one of the top 5. There's Northeast. You see some differences. See, teaching again? Did we mention we're here to talk about retention and getting more people in the profession? So I'm showing you we have a shortage. How about Southeast? Again, these are not in order. These are just the top 5 as I just wrote them down. And then let's go to Johnson, Wyandotte, and Leavenworth counties. Now you could add all those together, and what you would basically say is you need healthcare, you need an ag-related business, you need teaching, you need some coding and software development, you need some machining and manufacturing, and maybe you could throw in a truck driver every now and then, right? They got to haul the stuff. Okay? So we talked about perception of the profession, and now we look, are there any jobs sitting out there in Donovan County for teaching? I'm going to focus on teaching. We could talk about healthcare, but we're not here to talk about healthcare. We're here to talk about teachers. And by the way, I'm putting what some people would call non-instructional support in that. I'm looking at Judy when I say it. Counselors, social workers, school psychologists, librarians, okay? We're calling that teachers. Principals, by the way, superintendents. We have a leadership vacuum. So let me then share with you what our own profession then does about this job market. So we kind of shared how we kind of think of Kansas Teacher Year or the Keene Conference. By the way, everyone wants to be a teacher of promise, and everyone wants to be Horizon Award winner. I don't know why, because I don't know, but they don't want to be the Kansas Teacher of the Year. Like Teachers of Promise didn't go, oh, I hope I don't get it. No, they're like, I hope I do get it, because I may mean I get a job. And the Horizon Award, I get to call them, and they're surprised. They're so excited, second year teachers. And, and these people are like, I don't know if I should even be here. So let's see how we're doing. We have some things called pathways in Kansas. Some of you who teach career and tech ed know that. We do that in order to get kids into jobs, right? So I thought I would just share with you the most common pathways all across Kansas. And I was so excited when I saw Gayla here, because family and consumer science is the #1 pathway in Kansas. Okay? There are 236 school districts of the 286 that have a pathway of family and consumer science. So there's your undergraduate work, Debbie, right there, right? However, we only have 103 of the 286 school districts that even have a teaching pathway. This hurts me. So let's go back to the Cabbage Patch. Everyone wanted a Cabbage Patch doll. Who wants to be a teacher? How hard is it that when you want to be a teacher, when you go to your parents and they say, I don't know that I want you to do that? How hard is it when the 4th grade teacher in your building says, I'm not going to encourage you to go be a teacher? There's not a thing anyone external can do when the message inside of schools is, I don't think I ought to encourage you to be a teacher. That's what was so exciting when I saw Sam Neal talking about be a teacher, be proud. We have to go back. Why do we only have 103 of the 286 school districts have teaching as a pathway when we ought to have, that ought to be the #1 pathway? If you were going to start pathways, tell me why. Tell me why. Because I know the reason. This is one of the things we could change tomorrow. But tell me why. Tell me why the left side has more than the right side. It's easy. I have someone that can teach it. That's the reason. I may not have anyone that can teach healthcare or, guess what? Here's some. Would you guys like to teach teaching to the pathway and encourage young people, right? Remarkable. We need to have, starting next year, 280, 280 of the 286. Let's say some are a little slow. And you know what? Then you know what you need to do? Is you go down again to someone in your community and you say, how about if we'll start with one. How about we scholarship someone, this is happening out in Greeley County, in Tribune. We'll scholarship one young person if they'll come back and teach in the community that they grew up in. Our very best. Our very best. We're going to encourage our very best that have an aptitude to do it. And it'll start with 1 and then 5. And you get someone and it costs you nothing, and your businesses will jump up and down and want to do it. It takes collaboration and different thought. It takes some time. It takes some marketing. It takes some us talking about the profession. So I told you I'm going to talk about this week. So do any of you still, on Thanksgiving night after you have a full belly, do any of your families still drive around and look at the lights? That was such a family tradition. All right, and we'll talk about that when I get everyone. But my sister, who claims to be a great supporter of public education, she works for Children's Mercy. And she is. She's not an educator, but she's a K-State grad. And she really bleeds purple. And she will tell me somewhere over the weekend, because my daughter's a teacher, and so we'll have this discussion. She'll say, I don't get it. Randy, Children's Mercy is the most mission-driven organization. You may have some others, but we are committed. Their kids can come there, families pay nothing, and we're trying to heal them. They have cancer, they have all these problems. We are mission-driven. And some days, it's a pain in the rear to work at Children's Mercy. We take on all the responsibility these poor families bring us. We're stressed to the hilt. And she says, I've never once, ever seen one of our employees go to Facebook and complain about how hard it is. Why do you do that? Why do the teachers get on and pray for a snow day? It sends the message that we don't care. And I just listen. Comes back to the marketing. She goes, teachers get on there and tell about how hard they work. We do too. So I want to support, but why do you do that? And then why do you get on and say, I really hope we have a snow day tomorrow? Like, I don't care that you send your kids? She goes, you've got to change that discussion. We can change it by nominating people for Teachers of Promise and having every teacher prep program recognized for Teacher of Promise, every school district nominating 1 or 2 people for the Horizon Award, and every school district, even if you're small and it's on a rotation. So when I was in McPherson, we alternated between elementary and secondary. I think they do both now, but when I was there, we just alternated, right? You don't even have to have anything to do with it. KNEA would love to run it if you ask them. You can have students vote. I don't care how you get there. Get your community involved and run it, and then have a pathway to encourage your best and brightest to go into the profession. Isn't that simple? But what we would rather do is say, who's going to solve it outside of me? So Dr. Berry talked about something that we're doing in Kansas called redesign. Now I want to talk a little bit about that too, because of the outgrowth and what we've seen, what we're trying to do on it. And so I've shared this with every audience, and I want to share it with you today. So if you're online or you want to get out your phone, I want you to go to mini.com, and you can see here what we call our Kansas Can competencies. These were derived by what Kansans said they wanted in their schools, and then Amy and Patty that did the work at KU said, what does research support from what Kansans said of the skill sets? These are all good. Oh, they're all good. But I'm going to ask you, as you type in your code, you can go back and you can do this. You can set this up. Minty doesn't cost you a dime to do this, but we're going to do it. I want you to only pick one. I know they're all good. They are, because as Kansas said, you have to have all of these to be successful. But if you were going to have your own child later on become an adult, and you only had to pick one that you wanted teachers and yourself and your grandparents and everyone else to instill in your kid, which one would you pick? So we're going to give you a little time to pick one. Spelling counts, by the way. Let's not throw that out. Spelling counts. So feel free on your phone or your computer, go to minty.com, and then there's the code, and then pick one. By the way, audience, there's some of you will pick things not on the chart. We'll have to point you out. Those are the people that go on to be CEOs and own the world, right? Bill Gates, they just make stuff up, which is always good. I'll give you a little bit of time. Some of you love technology but are a little challenged by it, and you did not have in your preparation program in K-12 thumb typing. So I understand that. So Mrs. Brophy in the early 70s made us learn on a manual typewriter, Rick, and because she said, I remember, you don't know when you may not have electricity. I remember even thinking then, if I don't have electricity, the last thing I want to be doing is typing on anything anyway. But that was common at that time. So, are you good? Welcome to 77 responses. This adds, by the way, to our tour that we did a little bit over 3 years ago. This is what you think are the most important skills of all the skills that Kansas said are important. By, you know, the word wall gets bigger by the number of responses. So perseverance would be number one, followed closely behind by empathy, critical thinking, problem solving, integrity, and we're still adding to it. We're up to 85 now. Done over 4,000 of these. Perseverance and self-regulation. Oh, these are all what come up over and over. A little bit variance. Okay. Again, you can do this. I encourage you to do this with Kiwanis Club. Do it with your own faculty, because all of those skill sets are important. So I'm going to jump back to this. So, and I'm going to step just to the side so I can see it. Intrapersonal, interpersonal, cognitive. That's how they're organized. These are all great, right? And yet, as I looked at that, and there may have been someone in the room, and I didn't see it because it may have been small. I was just glancing at it. But certainly not very many of you, if any of you, chose content knowledge as the most important. It is important, right? All of these are important, but I have over 4,000 responses and I don't see content knowledge coming up like big. That's exactly how we organize school. Time, content, age. Time, content, age. This is easy to think about. The solutions are right in our face. It's hard to execute. So we said if we're going to lead the world, if we're going to change the metrics of the trajectory of kids at Wyandotte High School, where Whitney's at, and at Chaparral High School, it doesn't matter. We have a huge gap. And it's not because teachers aren't great, and it's not because they don't work hard. But they've been blamed for all that, as have principals and superintendent. The state board, we think it's a structure issue. Is that the schools that are made up today weren't made for every student to be successful. They didn't need to be for a long time. Few needed to be, and a lot needed to have basic skills. And so the organization we have, there's nothing wrong with it. And the more stable the home environment that the kids come from, the more well they do in the schools that we have. But we said we think we've got to have a different structure. And then we said this. We have 47 school districts over around 110 schools right now in Mercury and Gemini. But we said this. How about we take principals, superintendents, parents, we're not good at this either, just aren't, and teachers in a flat organizational model, and we let them design the school that they would want their own kids to go to. And you know, in the Mercury, you know what happened the first 6 weeks that we started that? Teachers couldn't do it. Because they'd never been asked to design a school. They've been asked things like this. How would you like to run recess? Now remember, we can't do it before lunch, so it's going to have to be after lunch between 12:15 and 12:30. And you got to run right? We put all these parameters. This time we said, no parameters, go do it. And they looked at us and then they would defer to the principal. And the principal would say, well, I don't know about the bus. Forget the bus. I mean, that's how we do things in school. We can't do that because this is the bus schedule. Can't do that because this is when we have to go to lunch. Can't do this because this is when band has to be. We'll never get there until we start over and say, how should we organize schools? So maybe this weekend, state football championships. Only 2 left per classification. And what you would see from 1A to 6A, if you went to those, is you'll see great kids, great support, and a team of football coaches, right? a head coach with a lot of assistants. And many of those, Wayne, I would bet at Spring Hill, if your football job was open this year, that you're probably not going to hire someone right out of school to coach that. You're going to want some experience. And you're going to place some assistants with some experience or not some experience. Maybe some don't want the responsibility and others are young. And they're going to learn from a head coach that's pretty good. I had the opportunity many years ago to hire a guy named Tom Young to come coach football at McPherson. We had never made the playoffs in one time in the history of McPherson, and we never missed the playoffs after hiring him. More kids were out, and I told the current coach, who's very successful, who had the opportunity to leave on several occasions, stay and learn all you can from Tom Young, because you'll never get the opportunity. So here we have a great group of teachers, and when they get ready to go, this is what Dr. Bear was talking about, when they get ready to go teach, they say to their colleague, their new teacher, I'm here to mentor you, I'm here to help you in any way we can, and the door shuts and they don't see each other again until 3 o'clock. That's a recipe for disaster. I need to learn every day by watching and asking questions from the very best teacher. We talked about co-teaching, we talked about organization. The one-room schoolhouse teacher was only one teacher, but had kids for multiple years. What if we had 3 teachers having 60 kids, design the day together? One was a master teacher, one was a new teacher, one was an older teacher that just didn't want that responsibility anymore, and they would grow. That's what the research says. And we could do that if we just thought differently about the schedule. And then, by the way, we could even share kids. Rick was talking about, maybe Debbie and I are going to do something cool between K-State and KU. We could actually share kids that are 10 miles apart if we change the schedule. But we can't do it. Well, we're on a different schedule. Well, who set the schedule? Educators make all this stuff up. So as we go to lunch, money makes a difference. And it really makes a difference, I have found, when you believe that you're not respected. Have you ever noticed that? Teachers die. They'll work hard until they don't feel respected, and then it's how much you paying me for that? No, I'm dead serious. And I will tell you when the disrespect happened in Kansas was when tenure was pulled away. Whether or not it had an effect, we could argue about, right? But the perception is you don't respect us by doing it. Then money mattered. Now, let's give the legislature lots of credit. There's a 5-year school finance bill that the Supreme Court said was great. Said put some cost of living in there and we're done and we'll go home. All right, we moved from 42nd in the country to 40th, and this year we think we'll be 37th, 38th. We think over the 5 years we're going to move toward the median. All right, we're already ahead of Oklahoma by forever. And we're already ahead of Missouri. And we believe this year we'll surpass Colorado, and then that leaves Nebraska. And then money won't be the issue. It's going to happen. All right? So quit whining about we don't have money. Now, you need to make sure they put the cost of living in it, but it's going to happen. State Board has a budget that will be going to the governor, and the legislature did a heavy lifting to get that, and the court agreed. So, by the way, that's not what happened in the last decade. I understand I'm a history guy. We like to play the tape over and over, but it's different about what's going to happen. We need to increase pathways to be a teacher from 103 to 286 as fast as we can, and we need to go in our elementary, middle, and high school, and we need to grab young people and say, I think you can be a teacher. I want to mentor you. I will do whatever it takes. Have you thought about that? We need to increase our recognition of teachers, and we need to be proud of it, and we need to understand that and this is true of principals and superintendents also, educators in general, that when Whitney became the Kansas Teacher of the Year, she knows, and it's true, she's not necessarily the best teacher in the state, but she represents him or her. And she's proud to do it. And she will do it all year, as will this team. And yet, I will tell you, one of the things that I hear from K-12 teams every year is, I get shunned a little bit when we go back to our buildings. Oh, why do we do that? And then we ask, why don't we get more people in the profession? And finally, we have to expand, redesign. We'll launch Apollo phase. We need 50, 60 more and then what happens? I can go to Rick and say, Rick, the system has shifted. And now our teacher prep programs have got to talk about that. You know, I'm asked all the time, when's teacher ed programs going to change? Why would we ask teacher ed programs to change when we won't change first? See, this is, again, this victim mentality that we're waiting for someone else to fix it. I get to live with all of you every day in 286 school districts in higher ed. We have the expertise. We don't need anyone else's help. We can do this. It's not that hard. But we've got to take the steps to start doing it. You're here to learn from other people. Great thing about our Kansas Teacher of the Year program, they're going to learn from a lot. They'll be better a year from now than they are today, because we're going to immerse them in watching other great Kansas teachers teach. They're going to share that across the state, and they will tell you by this time next year, I'm a better teacher. Why aren't we doing that with everyone? Coaches go to coaching clinic and steal from everyone all the time. We don't have a model that sustains that, and we can change that. And that's what the redesigned schools are trying to do. And by the way, they're not doing it as well as I want them to do it. We'll get better over time. We'll learn from those and we'll get better. But we have to start. You can go rent all the space, things, the Mercury and all the problems. The one I just went to, First Man, about Neil Armstrong, when his wife is yelling at Deke Slayton, Deke's saying, hey, she's worried that her husband's going to die in space because all his friends are dying. And she's yelling at Deke, who's the command module, was a Mercury astronaut, about how can you assure our kids that my husband will come back alive from Apollo 11? And Deke says, we got this. And she says, like hell you got it. You're a bunch of young kids trying to figure it out. We're going to be a bunch of teachers and principals and superintendents trying to figure it out. Not because we don't know what research says, because it will just look different. It will be messy. And you're going to have to engage parents in a different way. And I have full faith that we can do it. So I want to outgrow this facility too. This needs to be a bigger conversation with a lot more people in the audience. But I'm thankful that you're here today. I'm thankful that you're wrestling with this issue. And I'm grateful to live in a state where I know, because we're all going the same direction, that we'll get this done. We just have to stay on track. Thank you.